Here we go. Episode number 28 of the Business Not As Usual podcast. Of course, I am Vince. If you've been listening to the show to this point, you know who it's Vince and Mike. Mikey, how are you?
I'm good. Are we gonna do it with the intros? You know us. Let's just get the business.
Let's just get down and dirty. And I think that's very much, well, historically, I mean, maybe we can get into a little origin story here, Mike. You and I became friends and colleagues, if I may be so bold to say we're friends. We became friends and colleagues many years ago.
Yeah.
In the trenches of a transformational project. And hence our shared love of this work and our different perspectives.
Yep.
But you can only stay in the trenches for so long, and eventually there are people that rise up to be leaders. So and that actually is a good thing, because it means that the people who are making the decisions and owning the program actually have an appreciation for the work that is going into that's being done in the trench. And that's where we sort of arrived at today's topic, which is the role of the sponsor. Right. And I think you can bring a very unique perspective on that as someone who has gone from the trenches to being in a leadership role and playing that part of sponsoring, no longer doing, but sponsoring, which is very cool.
So I think maybe we could even break it more. So
sure.
Are we going to talk, or maybe we should, define our talk. Are we talking about like the executive sponsor, the project sponsor, or a person who is a sponsor of some work? Because I think we can talk about all of them. I know about, but I'm. It might be a little bit harder to talk about the other two. But I mean, we can talk about from a perspective of what we think of where we are, what we think a sponsor, how they help a program.
Yeah, I think we can talk about role to play in the development of a transformational work. So You're going to have roles and responsibilities for the executive sponsor, for the project sponsor. So think of almost like a hierarchy, right? So you've got your executive sponsor, who is essentially the sponsor for a portfolio of projects, which make up the transformation. Then you've got the individual sponsor, who is the project sponsor.
Right.
Then you've got sponsors of work, although from what I've seen, most organizations don't get into that level of granularity. Even though, and I think you were cutting up a bit there, but I think you said that's probably the one that's the most important, because it's the one that gets you closest to the work. It's the actual stuff, right?
I think that's the one where the most energy is expended.
Oh, absolutely.
Are you the sponsor of this end-to-end process that's going to be delivered, or this product? And that in that sponsorship of a product sponsorship at the executive level, that is where a lot of work is done. It's
absolutely.
A lot of work in communication, removing roadblocks, selling the product, also talking about it when it's not going well, which are the hardest conversations when you're in the red. You never want to be red, but when you're red, there's a lot of splaining to do.
Yeah.
Right. So
which is funny, because I was just in a webinar where someone was talking about project status and communication and whatnot, and they said no project is ever red. You're either green or you're yellow.
Right.
And there's different shades of yellow, but you never want to go to your sponsor and say that you're red, because then the red rolls, and
yes,
and people get cut.
But if you're honest, you spend most of your project in red.
Oh yeah,
that's been my experience.
And that's the funny thing,
and that's the explaining part, and that's the road. Like, if you're in green, then you don't really need me. Like, I can be in Tahiti. If you're green, I got nothing to do.
Right.
Like, well, let's get into it. Like, what does a sponsor do? A sponsor removes roadblock. Like,
yes,
the buck stops with the sponsor. So
yes,
stuff's going on, everybody's scurrying about, and when roadblocks come up, right, they go from level to level, and eventually it has to go to a level that has to settle the roadblock. Right. So if you're in green, Dan, put me on that. What's green? I'm gonna look across and go, what's green? I want to be the sponsor, because I don't have to do anything. I'm like, sweet business, baby. I'm not doing. I get to be sipping Mai Tais because it's all green. You guys got it handled.
Right.
Right.
And I think that's true of each level of sponsorship. So whether you are the executive sponsor or the project sponsor or a sponsor of work, like, that is your job. It's not necessarily to do,
right?
Which is why, I'm keen to get out of the doing, because I don't want to do any more work. But they have different things. I'm obviously joking. They have different things to do. They are your air cover, I think, would be a good way to describe it. They clear the way for the team, and whoever the team is, whether it's the functional team or the project team or the program team. They clear the way for them to be successful. And you're right. If you're truly green, there's nothing to talk about.
Nope.
It's
gold.
Right. I start when I do my Six Sigma training, and I do a workshop for leaders, and it's like, my hope is I have like a monthly check-in with you, and I never hear from you, because it means that the project's going well. If I hear from you, or if you hear from me, which is even worse, it means there's some doings a transpiring.
Yep.
And we have a problem that we need to address. Yeah. So, but you're right. If things are going well, there's not a ton for the sponsor to do, which is actually a good thing, because it allows the sponsor to manage multiple projects or programs or whatever, because they don't have to get knee deep in every single bit of minutia.
Right. But if ideally, and I don't think any sponsor would ever say it's that easy, and I doubt
it's not.
In the real world, you're never green.
Never.
You're in a version of yellow, of which you fudge, and then
it might be like
red.
Puke green, like that. Yes. That the yellowy.
It could
green.
Be. I think it's like baby diarrhea green, but it's not.
Okay.
You're not in like stoplight green. I'll tell you that much.
No, you're definitely not.
And the role of the sponsor is not to like just walk from you may think that because they always have a coffee in their hand, they're just going to meetings and yucking it up and having coffee. It's not true. No. Those meetings that people don't say is real work, there is a lot of understanding, seek to understand, negotiating. How can we do this? And in your head is a sponsor that then gives a vision to a team. You have what you want to happen.
Right.
But when you go into those meetings, you can't be, this is what I want because I'm the sponsor. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
There's a version of getting from where you are in red to what you want. And then somewhere over here, you can move people to get enough to remove the roadblock that you're okay with. It's probably not everything you got, but there's a lot of negotiation and consensus building and cooperation that you have to get to. And so there's a lot of discussion, and the sponsor's job is to constantly do that, right? Because while you're doing the work, you don't have time to negotiate and come to these agreements. Right. Like, your job is to go, we've gone as far as we can.
Right, which is actually the so we talked about the sponsor being that air cover, the clearer of barriers. That's one of the other major functions of the sponsor, which is setting the vision. So they create that sort of what does the future look like?
Right.
They aren't so concerned with how you get there. So they say, Mike, you need to get from Toronto to Buffalo. For some reason, you've got to go to Buffalo.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, you as the sponsor would say, I need you to be in Buffalo by tomorrow morning.
Right.
And then it's up to the project team or the program team to figure out the best way of getting there.
Right.
Do we drive? Do we fly? Do we walk? Do we swim? Do we it's up to them. And in the end, the sponsor doesn't care or generally shouldn't care if the result is what they were expecting and the result makes their stakeholders happy. Because that's the other thing. Yes, you are the sponsor, you are the owner, but you are still beholden to somebody else usually. Right. You have other stakeholders that you need to satisfy. And so, you need to do that. So as long as it happens, who cares?
Right.
And as long as there aren't barriers to you being successful, I don't care how you get there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think it's a big role, and it's one that I don't think is understood well enough. Again, at least in my experience, because you have people that attain titles, but then don't know how to be a sponsor, and so they end up being attached to things by virtue of their position in the organizational hierarchy, not because they are positioned to lead or to facilitate success. You know what I mean? Which makes it tough, and it's a super important role.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about You're facilitating all the people that are decision makers to try and help you get your team over these humps. And the sponsor's role is usually it's all day. It's all day about how you clear these barriers. It's not a passive role where most people think, oh, they're the sponsor, we have to make them happy. Like, I don't like the sponsor works for you. That's like, I just want to reverse that. And they don't work for you like, hey, go do stuff. What they work for you is
go grab me a coffee.
Well, I mean, when people hear that, it's like they have a perverse, like, oh yeah, we just tell them like, yeah, they work for me. It's the other way around. When I say that is they're constantly working to help you get success.
Right.
You're not trying to make them happy. Your job is not to make like, we need this for the sponsor. Like you do, because it's the sponsor's reputation on the line if it doesn't get done.
Right.
But their job is to help you get to where the project needs to be, which includes, going across the organization to get those barriers removed, which is discussion. It's not just, I'm the sponsor, I want it done. It's never that easy, and it never works in that way.
And that's a key distinction, because, in chances are your project or the thing that you are sponsoring is not the only thing going on.
Right.
And so you end up with competing priorities where you have sponsors duking it out. Figuratively, not literally. I hope figuratively. So you have sponsors duking it out because both have an obligation to the success of their work.
Right. To the overall work.
Right.
And so that's where the tough conversations come, right? Again, I have a role, someone else has a role, and both see those things as super important to the overall transformation. Right. And so that is where the conversation and the compromise come about, because somehow you both have to get it done.
Right.
And somehow you still have to get your vision to a point completed, right? So that is where these long meetings and conversation happen to remove roadblocks. They don't just happen.
Right.
And that's why I think that this level of sponsorship is probably one of the hardest. I mean, we can move to the next level that talks about, shareholders or the executive or the C-suite, which is a different type of role. But this role is really the one that has a lot of conversation to get things done.
Yeah, it's different, but it's not. Like, it's different in the sense that you're operating at a different level. What, folks in the C-suite value is different than what, your operational team will value. But it's still about engaging your stakeholders, ensuring that you are as the sponsor delivering value through your team. And then, but it's about engaging stakeholders and getting that done. So whether it's happening at a tactical level or whether it's happening at a strategic level, it's still the same activity. You still have to figure out how do you engage with your peers, or how do you reach across, across silos or across divisions or across barriers? How do you break down those barriers? And then how do you ultimately facilitate success for your program, or for your project, or for your task? I mean, you can get even down to that level of granularity, but that's a super important role. And thinking back to our episodes on the roles you need, I mean, this is your leader. Like, your leader should be your sponsor. They set the vision, they clear the way, they make sure things get done. But and they do that through negotiation, through engagement, through coffees. I've gotten probably more done in coffee meetings than in workshops. It's true. So, it's, you look at it and from an outside in perspective, and this is why I sort of joked earlier, like, I want to get into that leadership role so I don't have to do anything anymore. It's right. You still have to do stuff. It's actually a higher stakes game that you're playing. It just doesn't look like it from the outside because it looks like you're always having coffee, but that's unfair.
Or going to meetings.
Or going to meetings.
You're just in meetings.
You're just in meetings. Yeah. But nobody sees that you're, triple booked from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. And then you get, well, now we're at home. So you flip off your computer, and then now your cell phone's going nuts, and you're answering emails until, 1 a.m. Like, it's just, it is a lot of work, and a lot of it is about relationship building and barrier clearing.
Right.
So, I mean, you're not the one writing the code. You're not the one gathering the requirements, but you are the one that enables those things to happen.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about, because I think it's one of the it's the work that you do a lot of, like removing barriers, talking to your peers, talking to, your executive committees to try and remove roadblocks and help your team. The other thing that you do, and you talked about it, was vision. And we want to talk about, but also the thing that we've talked about a lot is instill in a culture that allows, like, it's your role, to do all the things that we talked about, right? Drive down decision making as much as you can, so you don't get all the escalations. Have your team works things out. Have them, try and build a team with speed, and so all those cultural things is also your role while you're trying to, remove roadblocks.
Yeah.
On the proactive level, you're doing vision, you're doing culture, you're doing how people work together within the team. That's also your role. You're talking about engagement, which we've talked about a lot. Like, how do you keep the team engaged, especially while we're working from home? How do you keep them thinking that, we talked about rapid iterations and all that, but when a team's 6 months into something and the excitement of the launch of the start of something is over, in the month 7, how are you keeping them engaged? How are you keeping them excited about the outcome? Because it's like in the old days, like a hockey game in February. Okay. It's like so I used to go watch the Toronto Maple Leafs down at the Maple Leaf Gardens.
Jeez.
And you really loved going right at the beginning. And you really loved going right at the end, because when they were about to make the playoffs, or maybe there was that excitement. Right. But the games you hated going to was like a Tuesday in February where they're kind of like they're kind of dogging it. It's cold outside. That's what the middle of a project is like, is going to see like this game that really doesn't mean much. And you're like, I don't want to go there and do all this. Like the excitement of the season, of the start of the season's over. The playoff hunt hasn't started. And you're like, I don't want to go see this stupid game about Buffalo. I don't want to watch them go watch Buffalo on a Tuesday in February. That's what the middle of a project is like.
I gotta say, I did not think I was going to enjoy that analogy.
Well, didn't see that one coming.
I did. That was well done, because I know that feeling, and you're right. That is what the middle of a project feels like.
Right. It's like when you go watch TFC, I'm pretty sure, like, I don't want to go see them against the last place team at the end of July when, like, you know what I'm saying?
I would, but yeah, but I mean,
even if it's raining.
Oh no, if it's raining, I'm not going. I'm like Newman.
No, it's raining. I won't go.
I'm raining. I'm not working today. No. So, and you're right. You're bang on that, because one thing a lot of people think about culture is that it only applies in the organization, and the truth is you can have multiple cultures.
Yeah,
and that is where a lot of conflict arises in organizations, is when there's conflict between different cultures,
right?
Or I guess you could call them subcultures within the organization.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. You do need to instill that the cultural norms and values of the team, because that makes those, late February hockey games easier.
Right.
Because you realize, you look around and you see, everybody on this team, we're here together. We're in this together. And yeah, right now sucks. But come April, when we're in the playoff hunt,
right,
it's going to be worth it.
Right.
And if you don't have that culturally ingrained in your program, or, again, whatever level you're operating at, it's easy to take your eye off the ball and, or in this case, the puck, and have something catastrophic happen.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think if we've really talked about the sponsor in the trenches. If we talk about the executive sponsor, yes, the kind of work is the same, but the amount of, conversation they have to have is more in the, how is like selling to the C-suite, or maybe their stakeholders or board of directors about how the project is going. Are we getting the value of money from what's being produced? Is the transformation going to be one of that 70%? And do we need to course correct? So it's a little bit, that is a little bit different than that conversation. The sponsor at that level is really keeping the rest of the organization via the your C-suite up to date on what's going on. And as we said, if your projects are red, the whole program is going to be red. So they have a lot of, are we getting the benefits? And we may be red, but we're still moving along. And there's a lot of that kind of conversation up into the people that continue to keep the project going. Right. So, and what's being delivered. Right. So,
And the strategic value. And I think that's the difference.
The strategic value of what you're getting from this. Like, are we truly transforming to get more market share? Is it what's going on? Or if it's not, then you become one of those projects that are cut. Right. So that sponsorship role at that level is important in those conversations.
Absolutely. Again, bang on. Right. And that's why I said earlier, the work is the same, but what you work on is different. At that level, you're having strategic conversations. At a lower level in the project or in the program, you're having more tactical or operational discussions. It's still about stakeholder management and engagement and doing the work, but it's different. And what those stakeholders look for is different. And what's interesting about that sort of, program executive sponsor type role is often they're going to get the tactical and have to turn it into strategic,
right?
Which can be a challenge, right? Like it's a hard sell to talk about the turning the tactical advantage of, let's say, like Lean Six Sigma and its operational efficient. Like we're gonna make this process more efficient by 18% when we're done.
Right.
Great. What does that mean strategically? So
right. How do you turn that into a story? Yes.
Exactly. Well, and how do you then say this is the strategic advantage that we are going to get as a result of doing this work?
Right.
And so it makes the challenge at that level that much more difficult, because they now have to translate the tactical into the strategic.
Yes.
And it's not a straight like, hey, we're going to be 18% more efficient. Yeah. Right. And so what? While you're wasting time on this, you could have been doing this other thing that was our priority.
Correct.
But if you can go and say, hey, look, we're doing this thing. When we are done, we can expect to be able to reduce operating costs by 20%.
Right.
Now that's a strategic.
Correct.
Right.
And that is when you have a talented sponsor that can take the flurry of work that's going on and turn it into the strategic story about how it fits in with the entire transformation and that transformational story. That is why you have that executive sponsor. That is their role there, to continue having that conversation with different governance tables and into the C-suite.
Right. Absolutely. So, I mean, I think we can both agree the role of the sponsor is an important one.
Yeah.
And it's important that the person who fills that role actually understands and can appreciate the magnitude of that role. It's not a title. It's not you get to put it on your business card that like, I'm the sponsor of this transformation.
Right.
Like that. It's about putting in the work, and we talked earlier about being that servant leader, clearing the way and making other people successful. Because I will say this, the best sponsors that I've encountered throughout my career are free with the praise when things are going well, but accept the failure when they're not.
Right.
So when things are red, they don't pin it on their team. They own that. But when things are going well and you deliver successfully, it's the team that did the work. So
absolutely,
it's a thankless role, but one that provides incredible value to your organization and to you if you gain a reputation for being a successful facilitator of success.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that is a good place to end our discussion on the role of the sponsor.
I would like to hear, just like you, from our listeners.
Yes.
What has been the best? Who has been? You don't have to name them, but what traits were the best sponsor that you've had for either at the executive level or at the program level? What did they exhibit, and how did they, help with the success of the work that you did as the sponsor, as the sponsor of your program? So, let us know. I'm interested to hear.
Hit us up at michaelmartino.ca or vincentmirabelli.com. We would love to hear from you and also hear what you think of the show. So be sure to like, subscribe.
That's right.
So I think I'm too old to do that.
Yeah,
So,
I think so.
anyways, this has been episode 28 of the Business Not As Usual podcast with Vince and Mike. We will catch you in the next one.